Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the John Campea Show here on my YouTube channel. I'm, of course, your host, John Campea, and it is an honor and a privilege to have you guys joining me here today, as we do every day, talking about our favorite things in the world, movies. Now, here's how today's show is going to go. I've picked out a couple of topics and questions that you guys have sent in to me. How do you send in a topic or a question to the John Campea Show? It's really quite simple. You just email me anytime at john@thejohncampeashow.com. That's john@thejohncampeashow.com. Make sure you put the word topic in the subject line. And guys, I've been noticing a lot of the emails have been getting longer and longer. Don't forget, keep the emails as short as possible. At most, they can be 90 words long. Okay, no longer than 90 words, but the shorter, the better. Okay, now, before we get into the show today, I've got a little bit of an announcement to make. A little bit of a scheduling announcement, if you will. Starting on Monday, the John Campea Show is going back to its 11 a.m. East Coast time, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. What that is in your time zone, you look it up. But it's 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 11 a.m. East Coast or New York time. Now, you remember a while ago, I wanted to test it out by moving it to 10 a.m. And I've had a number of people let me know that it has been more difficult for them to watch it live. For those of you who want to watch it live, it's been more difficult for a lot of people to watch it live at this time than it was a little bit earlier. So starting Monday, we're going to be going back to the early. So tomorrow we'll be back at this time, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1 p.m. East Coast time. But starting on Monday, I will be moving it back to the 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 11 a.m. East Coast time. So just so you're aware of that, want to make sure you know that right off the top. And then after that, I'll be going to your live questions and taking your live questions. Best way to get in a live question, of course, using Super Chat. That is there. You can start putting those in now. I will take the questions in the order they come in on. With all that out of the way, let's jump into the first emailed in topic today. And the first topic today came into us from Norman Leach, who wrote, "Hi, John, longtime fan." Thank you so much, Norman. I appreciate that. So my question is, since Disney has been so skittish about a sequel to Tron Legacy, would a Tron series on the new streaming service be feasible to continue the story? What do you feel are the chances of this happening, and keep up the excellent work? All right, thanks a lot for the question, Norman. I really appreciate it. Yeah, now, Tron Legacy was a little bit, I think it's fair to say the audience was a bit divided on Tron Legacy. It wasn't massively divisive or anything like that, but there's some people that really like Tron Legacy. Then there are some people like myself that I didn't care all that much for Tron Legacy. I didn't think it was bad. I didn't think Tron Legacy was bad. I just did not want to rush back out to watch it again, if you know what I mean. I wasn't crazy about it. Now, Disney put an awful lot of resources into that Tron movie, not just producing the movie. They did a massive marketing campaign. They really thought that there was a good shot that Tron Legacy could become like one of their next big franchises. They thought Tron could be their next big franchise. And the audience didn't completely love it. It didn't make that much money relative to what they were hoping it would do. And so these plans for Tron sequels eventually got shelved. So the question is, could we potentially see Disney utilizing their new streaming service in 2019, maybe for a Tron series? Maybe that's the way the Tron series can move on, the Tron story can move on. Well, on the surface, that sounds like it could be a neat idea. However, there's one major roadblock. And that roadblock was a little Tron animated series called Tron Uprising. Now, Tron Uprising ran for a grand total of 1 season. And honestly, I thought it was pretty good. I liked Tron Uprising. I thought the animation style was kind of clever and very unique. I thought the story to it was quite good. Elijah Wood was the lead voice actor, and I always mispronounce his name, but the guy who actually played Tron, Bruce Boxleiter, is that how you pronounce his last name? Anyway, the original guy who played Tron, did the voice of Tron in Tron Uprising. Tricia Helfer, who is, of course, in Lucifer, and she was in Battlestar Galactica, she's one of the voices as well. Lance Hendrickson is one of the voices in there as well. It's a really solid show, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. Well, John, then, Why is it a problem? Because here's the problem. Nobody watched it. Nobody watched Tron Uprising, which is a shame because it wasn't a bad show. But I remember the producer of the show, like right from episode 3, was tweeting out things like, "Hey guys, really love that you're enjoying the show, but can you tell your friends about it? Because we need viewers." And I remember the producer of the show tweeting out a number of times while this season was going, "Guys, we really need help. We really need viewers." Nobody was watching it. And then if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong about this, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat section, but like I think the final like 2 episodes of season 1, Disney was so disappointed with it, they like moved it to like midnight on Wednesdays. Like the last 2 episodes, they just basically buried the final couple of episodes. Which again, is too bad because I actually thought Tron Uprising was kind of cool. I liked it. But the audience wasn't there. And the audience didn't support it. People weren't looking for a Tron TV series. So when you ask the question, okay, they've been nervous about doing a sequel, but maybe a new series. The problem is just like 2 years ago, they tried a series. 2 or 3 years ago, however long ago it was now. And it failed kind of miserably. So while it's absolutely possible, and Disney will definitely be looking for new content to put on their streaming service, I would not bet any money. I would not hold my breath, and I would not bet any money whatsoever about Tron getting a new series. I just don't. Disney has tried it. The movie didn't work out the way they wanted to. They tried doing a series. Nobody watched the series. So I think you're going to see Disney pretty apprehensive about a new one. But again, anything is possible. I, for one, would give it a shot. If they tried something new with Tron, I would give it a shot. All right, let's move on now to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Lindsey M. And Lindsey M writes, "Hey, John, love the show. Thank you so much, Lindsey. Yesterday you said if Aquaman makes under 400 million, that would be considered a bomb. But if you remember, Batman Begins only made 374 million, and that was not considered a flop. So can you please elaborate on this? Thanks." Okay, thanks a lot for the question, Lindsey, and it's a good observation. Now, this all comes from a conversation we had on the show last week, I think. Anyway, the notion was this. We were talking about, we were theorizing, hey, what would Aquaman be able to hit that we would consider it a big success? How badly would Aquaman have to do for us to consider it a flop, and blah, blah, blah. And I kind of said, look, if Aquaman made like $600 million, I think the studio should be happy with that. And I don't think it should be considered a flop at like $600 million. I'm not even sure it should be considered a flop at $500 million, to be honest with you. But I did say, if it makes $400 million, you have to consider that a tragic, tragic outcome. If you're Warner Brothers and Aquaman comes out, makes $400 million, that's tragic. That you got to consider a flop. Now, what Lindsey then brings up, quite accurately so, she says, well, wait a minute, John. Wait a minute. Batman Begins is not considered a flop. And it made just a hair under 400 million, about $375 million. And we don't consider that a flop. So why, if Aquaman comes out and makes 400 million, would we consider that to be a flop? Why would we consider that to be a major disappointment? Why would we consider that corporately a tragedy? From a movie studio perspective, a tragedy, not in global kind of senses, but from a movie studio point of view, why would we then consider that a tragedy and a flop? It all comes down to context. Context means everything. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, I got sick for a couple of weeks. I still have the cough. I think I got a bit of bronchitis. I'm going to have a cough for a few more weeks. So I'm going to be using lozenges while I'm doing the show and sipping on tea. So I apologize for that. I know it's a little bit irritating, but I have to do it or else I'm coughing and hacking and wheezing through the whole show. Like I just coughed right now. Anyway, it's all about context. Remember, when Batman Begins came out, I believe it was 2005. So we're talking 13 years ago. And when Batman Begins came out, while there was certainly a growing momentum for this genre, comic book movies were not the most powerful genre, the most popular genre by far, the biggest box office force like it is today. Today, you put out a comic book movie, you're guaranteed $500 million. I mean, no other genre can you do that. There's no other genre that you can do that with. But 13 years ago, when Batman Begins came out, that was not the case. It wasn't the case that, you know, that comic book movies were the most powerful force on the movie landscape. It wasn't the case that we were getting 7 comic book movies a year, all of which could be expected to do minimum X amount of bank. We didn't have an audience in 2005 that was more conditioned to really being into comic book movies and more accepting of comic book movies and rushing out to see comic book movies. It was a different time. Also, I mean, Batman Begins was really the first of its franchise. Yeah, there were Batman movies before, but they hadn't made one in a while, and this had nothing to do with the previous Batman films. So it was really them starting from scratch. Batman Begins was the first step for a lot. Now, Spider-Man was out there and having some success, yes, but it's not like you had 30 comic book movies out there that all had made $600, $700 million. That was a different time. So the gauge by which we measure the success of comic book movies, as comic book movies have gotten more and more successful as a genre, the expectations for it goes up and up and up a little bit as well. So in 2004, you put out a comic book movie and it makes $370 million. Hey, for a comic book movie, for a stupid little comic book movie, that's amazing. Today, that's different because we live in a different context now. But more importantly than that is this, is you have to take into consideration the state of affairs with the DCEU right now. All right? Let's put this in context. The DCEU has 5 films out right now. Aquaman will be its 6th. All right? The first one, Man of Steel, made $668 million. The second one, Batman vs. Superman, made $873 million. The next one, Suicide Squad, I think overperformed with a really nice result of $746 million. Wonder Woman did very strong at $821 million. But then came Justice League. Now, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but it's relevant to this conversation to bring up this point one more time. Justice League was supposed to be their version of the Avengers. The Avengers, Marvel, big money movie, big money movie, big money movie, and then they put out Avengers, the culmination of it, and it's a $2 billion film. That's what Justice League was supposed to be. Justice League became the referendum, if you will, by the audience on whether or not they have been enjoying this DCEU. Justice League was supposed to be, originally in concept, a potential $2 billion film. Without any excuses, it should have been a $1 billion film. But what happened? The referendum came out on what the audience thinks of the DCEU so far by putting out the big Justice League movie, the culmination of the DCEU, and it hit $655 million, a series low. Who would have ever thought that a Justice League movie would end up being the lowest box office movie, that the least amount of people were interested in going out to see? Who would have ever thought that that would be the case with Justice League? But that's what it was. Okay, now the reason I bring all that up is to set the stage again for Aquaman, okay? Right now, the lowest box office movie in the DCU is $655 million, and that's the lowest. So right now, the DCEU, if you want to talk about patterns, their most recent film was the lowest performing film they put out so far. So now let's say, for argument's sake, and I'm not saying Aquaman's only going to make $400 million. I'm not, but this is the question you've asked. Why would we consider it a tragedy? Why would we consider it a flop if Aquaman comes out and make $400 million? Again, it's all about context. If it made just $400 million, here's what it would mean. It would mean that for the second film in a row, for the DCEU would have put out consecutive films that set new records for series low. Justice League came out, the worst results they've ever had. If they put out Aquaman and it makes $400 million, that would be the second film in a row that they put out that set a new low bar. A new record for futility. They did that with Justice League, and if they put out Aquaman and it makes $400 million, yet another new record for futility. Not just would it be the second movie in a row that the DCU puts out that is their lowest performing box office film, it would be its lowest box office performing film by a mile. If, for argument's sake, Aquaman makes $400 million, that's a full $255 million less than the previous lowest making money movie, which is Justice League. It'd be $268 million less than the very first movie in their franchise, which was, of course, Man of Steel. Now, if Aquaman were to, say, make $500 million, it would still be the second movie in a row that the DCU hit an all-time low. It would still be the second movie in a row that that made hundreds of millions of dollars less than all the other films had. But that extra $100 million makes a difference. It cushions the blow quite a bit. But yeah, man, I mean, if Aquaman comes out in today's environment, where comic book movies are the hottest tickets, where 7-8 comic book movies a year come out and they all gross X amount of money, you now put out an Aquaman in that environment, and it becomes the lowest, for the second time in a row, the lowest box office grossing DCEU movie ever. And by far, underperforming where they want this thing to be, coming off the train wreck. I mean, I personally like Justice League. You know why I liked it, but that movie should have potentially been a $2 billion movie. Easily should have been a $1 billion movie. And here we are talking about it being the lowest box office movie of the DCEU. Coming off of that, DC cannot have a $400 million Aquaman. You just can't. So yes, Batman Begins made $374 million, but that was a totally different environment, a totally different set of circumstances, and a totally different scenario that it was in than what the DCEU is in right now. What happened 13 years ago with Batman Begins is not an adequate, comparable place for today's movie environment with where the DCEU currently sits. So yeah, I kind of stand by that. If Aquaman were to come out and make just $400 million, it would be considered a disaster, not only for the movie itself, but also for the DCEU as a whole. But let me say right here, too, as I mentioned before, I don't think that's what Aquaman's going to do. I think Aquaman will perform better than that. I don't think Aquaman's going to be a $700 million movie, or no, it's not going to make that much, but I think north of 500 is realistic. And north of 500 isn't great news for WB or DC, but it's also not a train wreck, and it's not a tragedy. But again, if DC goes from their worst performing movie ever, DCEU, and that was Justice League for heaven's sakes, and then take another massive nosedive to the $400 million range, that's not a downward trajectory, that's a going off the cliff trajectory. And that would just be, I mean, that's not recoverable at that point. So I don't think it's going to make that little. I'm predicting 500 million or north. But if it were to come in at 400, man, it would be whatever. And I know there's a lot of people out there that every time a DCEU movie underperforms, whatever, they come up with excuses. Oh, critics were paid off. Oh, this happened. Oh, that happened. Oh, this. Oh, it's the Joss Whedon. Oh, it's because they did that to Zack Snyder. Guess what? Guess what? People didn't know whether they liked the movie or not until they went out to see it opening weekend. And the opening weekend for Justice League was not good. So let's stop with the excuses. Let's stop with the fairy tale make-believe reasons why. And just accept the fact that Justice League did not do anywhere near what it needed to do. Okay? There are people out there who want to call Star Wars The Last Jedi some massively underperforming thing. It's about to cross $1.3 billion. Okay? If you want to say that, don't start making excuses for Justice League. barely crossing 650 million. Half of what The Last Jedi made. So, anyway, it's a big kerfuffle and hubbubaloo, but that is why I do believe they have to make more than that. And I think they will. But they must. They absolutely must. All right. Let's move on now to the final emailed in question today. And this is a big one that was going around all over the place yesterday. Here it is. John Ardon writes in, I've heard or read numerous reports, I should say, that Ben Affleck turned down the chance to direct the Flashpoint movie. What are your thoughts? Yeah, now I'm sure all of you guys who are watching right now have at least somewhat heard rumblings about this. You heard something that had something to do with this, blah, blah, blah. Something about Warner Brothers offered the Flashpoint director's gig to Ben Affleck and he turned it down and it became a big kerfuffle, all right? Here's what actually happened, okay? There was a story in Variety, because Variety broke the news yesterday, of course, that the Vacation directors, it looks like they're going to be directing the Flashpoint movie. That was their story. The story was that the Vacation directors, a couple of the guys who helped out with the screenplay on Spider-Man Homecoming, there were 6 writers, but 2 of the guys who were those writers. And the only motion picture they've ever directed was that Ed Helms train wreck of a film, Vacation. And these 2 guys are the ones that Warner Brothers is tapping to direct Flashpoint. That's the story, and that was the headline. However, within that story, buried in that story, is this little throwaway line that Variety just kind of peppered in there. It wasn't in the headline. It's just kind of a little throwaway line. Blah, 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 Flashpoint, blah, 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 these new directors, blah, 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 blah. And then out of nowhere, there's this one little line in the story that goes, Ben Affleck was approached to direct it, but he turned it down. And then they move on and on. It's like, well, wait a minute. What? What? That's like saying, it was raining in Tokyo today. Yeah, it rained. They thought it was going to be a sunny day, but it ended up raining. And that's headline, rainy day in Japan. And yeah, so it was raining in Japan. They thought it was going to be sunny because it was sunny. And Elvis Presley rose from the grave and started singing, and then it started raining. So yeah, headline, raining in Japan. It's like, wait a minute, what? Elvis Presley rose from the grave? What? How is that not the headline? So that's what kind of went around yesterday, is this whole thing of story, oh, these 2 guys no one's ever heard of who directed a really horrible movie might be directing Flashpoint. Oh, and by the way, Warner Brothers offered Flashpoint to Ben Affleck. And it's like, wait, what? So it's important to understand that this whole thing did not come from a headline. It didn't come from a story. It came from a seemingly throwaway line buried in the meat of another story. Just saying, oh, and by the way, Ben Affleck was offered to direct Flashpoint. And obviously, for understandable reasons, that is the point that caught everybody's attention. I was like, well, you got one of the best directors in Hollywood. I am an unapologetic Ben Affleck fan, and I don't care what you think of him, whatever. I think the dude's a brilliant filmmaker. I think he's one of the best filmmakers working today. But anyway, you offered, and he turned it down with all the drama going around surrounding Warner Brothers and Ben and Batman and all this kind of stuff, and you bury this little point in the story? Okay, now what I'm about to tell you is not new, because there are a couple of other outlets and people online that have already been saying this, like as of last night. So what I'm about to tell you is nothing new, okay? But I reached out because it seemed odd to me. Why would Variety bury something like that? Like, how is that not your headline? That's a pretty significant thing and sheds a whole new dimension and a whole new light on the whole dynamic between Ben Affleck and Warner Brothers and all that kind of stuff. How do they do that? Anyway, I reached out to one of the people who was the first one to let me in on the fact that Ben Affleck was probably stepping away from directing Batman, and it happened. And he was also one of the people that let me in on the fact that Matt Reeves' choice to be Batman, at least at the time, his first choice is Jake Gyllenhaal. Both of those turned out to be true. That doesn't mean what he told me, doesn't mean he's correct, doesn't mean that he's right. I'm just saying, this is who I got this information from. Could be right, could be wrong, whatever. But What this person told me was, no, that never happened. Warner Brothers did not approach and offer Flashpoint to Ben Affleck. It did not happen. Now, when I pressed on that, because, you know, Variety is not like cosmic book news. I mean, Variety is Variety. They're very reliable. What they then replied to me with that is this, is that it is conceivable that ages ago, like well over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, when the initial discussions about Flashpoint came out, it is conceivable that maybe like 2000, sometime in 2016, it is conceivable that there were some discussions about Flashpoint, and maybe Ben was brought into those discussions and said, hey, would you be interested in directing this film? And at the point he said no, because he really much rather be doing Batman at the time. Now, they said it's possible that that's where they're getting that from, that maybe that happened. And to be fair to Variety, it didn't say in the story that Ben Affleck was recently offered Flashpoint. Maybe Ben and Flashpoint were a part of some discussions that happened in 2016 at some point, and thus made it into the story, and thus Variety is not technically incorrect by putting that in there. However, just to give it context right now, from what I've been told, and as I said, there are a couple of other people online who are saying this exact same thing. A few other online journalist personalities have done some checking around and asked with some of their sources, and their sources are telling them the same thing, that that didn't happen. Ben was not recently offered Flashpoint. So, it was in the Variety story. It was kind of buried down in the details. So if what I'm being told is correct, and that's a big if, but if what I'm being told is correct, then that means that, yes, at some point there was an offer, but it would explain why, if it was back in 2015, 2016, early 2017, if that's the case, it would explain why Variety didn't run that as a story and just kind of buried it as one of the minor little details in a bigger story about these other guys taking over Flashpoint. That would make sense. So, from my perspective, Ben was not recently offered this thing. There are still stories. There are some people still claiming that is the case, and maybe it is. Maybe it is. All I can tell you, as all I can ever tell you, is what I have been told. All I can tell you is what has been communicated to me. And maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. But what I'm being told is that Ben was not offered the job. And which, if he was offered the job, it goes completely contrary to everything we know about the relationship between Warner Brothers and Ben right now. And if they were to offer the job, I'm sure he probably wouldn't take it anyway, which is consistent, I suppose. So that's where things are at. Have you guys heard anything else or anything different? Let me know in the comments section below. All right. With all that out of the way, I'm going to go on to the live questions right now, and I'm going to let you guys know it is now 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm asking you guys right now, if you have not sent in a question, do not send in any more questions. There's more than enough there for me to try to get through at this point. So any questions that come in from this point on, I probably won't be able to get to. But Salvador Rodriguez is the last question, so I'll do my best to get all the way down to Salvador's question. Now, before I get to the live questions, I want to talk for just a second. Let me do my little shameless plug for the thing that keeps the lights on around here, and that is my Patreon campaign. Listen, guys, do me a favor. If any of you guys watch my shows on any kind of a regular basis, or you enjoy spending time on the program and hanging out here with us, do me a favor. Take a second after the show is done and go to www.patreon.com/John Campea. Once again, that's www.patreon.com/John Campea. There you'll get all the information about what it means to be a Patreon supporter, how being a Patreon supporter makes sure these shows can get made, and then also what benefits there are to being a Patreon supporter. And after reading through all of that, if you guys decide you want to help out and be part of the reason these shows can happen, awesome, that's wonderful. And if not, that's totally fine. I'm just glad you guys are here being a part of the show with us. All right, with that out of the way, let's get over to the live comments that you guys who are watching live right now have been sending in. And this first question comes to us from Curtis Lopez, who writes, what's your opinion on shippers, like people who ship Ray and Rilo, and Finn Wolfhard and Millie Bobby Brown, Philly? To me, it's annoying, especially when they try to ship real celebrities? I'll be honest with you, Curtis. I have no idea what you're talking about. Honestly, I don't. I saw your question pop up earlier, and I was like, I don't know what the hell a shipper is. What are you talking about, a shipper? Honestly, and maybe this is me showing I'm not 25 anymore, I don't know what a shipper is. So I cannot properly address your question. But you sent in another question, so hopefully I can answer this one. And your other question that you sent in, Curtis, was, I know the last Airbender movie is terrible, and I hope one of these days you give the original cartoon a chance. I know you will love it. I don't know. I've seen a few minutes of it. But here's the thing, Curtis. There are a number of people that I personally know whose tastes pretty much align with mine, who love that show. Just love it. So I am planning, when I have some time to sit down and do some binging, I am planning on giving the series, I got to admit, it's not high on my priority list right now. I got a few other series I got to get to that I haven't started yet, but I've got a number of people that I know personally that have highly recommended the show to me. It is on my list. I will get around to checking it out, and when I do, I will let you know what I think about it. All right, thanks a lot, Chris. Next one comes from Micah, and Micah writes in, do you think the character of Legion could work on the big screen? I'd love to see Charles eventually have to go against his son, but is he too trippy? Well, look, one thing I can say for sure is, if we ever do get Legion on the big screen, it won't be the same Legion from the television show. I'll tell you that right now. They may create a new character of Legion, and if they do, nothing says they have to make him as trippy as he was on the television show. He could be less trippy, or he could be more trippy, I don't know. Those of you who've watched me for any period of time, you know my all-time favorite comic book set series, like storyline, my all-time favorite comic book storyline was the Age of Apocalypse storyline in the X-Men. Now, immediately before the Age of Apocalypse storyline starts, Legion is actually the one who starts the events of Age of Apocalypse. Legion, who has a change of heart, decides, no, I want to do something good for my dad. I know, Magneto's always given my dad a hard time. I'll go back in time and kill Magneto so that my father can have his life without having to deal with Magneto all that time. The problem is, when he goes back in time to kill Magneto, he goes back to a time when Magneto and Charles are still best friends, and Charles sacrifices himself to save Magneto's life, and now the future is rewritten as if Charles Xavier died 20 years ago. And Eric Lesnar, Magneto, moved by the sacrifice of his best friend, founds this group called the X-Men, named after the X in his friend Xavier's name. And Apocalypse has taken over North America. Magneto leads the Resistance. It's great. If you haven't read Age of Apocalypse, I could talk Age of Apocalypse all day. And the climax of Age of Apocalypse, which you know it would be right from the very first issue, is Apocalypse and Magneto finally going mano a mano. And it is some of the most erection-inducing geek boner moments in comic book history. I just love it. I eat it up. But anyway, I'm getting carried away. It all starts with Legion. Legion is a very significant character. So, honestly, I could totally see them bringing Legion to the big screen sometime. Again, I don't think it would be the television Legion, because then you have to deal with all these continuity issues, and Marvel doesn't want to do that. So, yeah, I think we will see him. I do. Thanks a lot, Micah. All right, next one comes to us from Curtis again, who writes, what movies or movie scenes made you hungry? Almost anything in Ratatouille. Ratatouille and the Jon Favreau movie Chef. Oh, actually, maybe even Chef. I mean, Ratatouille is a better movie than Chef. But man, what Jon Favreau does in Chef, yeah, there are a number of scenes in that movie, man, that just makes me want to stop the movie and run out to a local Cuban restaurant and get a great sandwich or something like that. My mouth is watering just thinking about Chef. I'm not kidding. I wish I could, physically show you. My mouth is like a rainstorm right now just thinking about Chef. Love that, man. It makes me very hungry. Orange Hand writes, will we ever again see some new original franchises that has the same impact on people's lives and our culture as a whole that Star Wars did? Probably not. I mean, look, gosh, how long ago did the first Harry Potter movie come out? A long time ago, but still, we're in the modern era. Harry Potter. I mean, it didn't have the same impact as Star Wars per se, but it was a major impact on our pop culture. It still is a very significant, powerful thing in our pop culture, so that's happened. But something to that degree that sticks around and still puts out the #1 movie of the year 40 years later, I don't know. Honestly, man, I don't know that we'll ever see something like that again. We will definitely see franchises come out that have a big impact on pop culture. That will always happen. But something to the degree of like a Star Wars, oh man, I don't know. That's a really, really tall order. Jordan Cadwell writes, what has been your favorite Best Picture winner of the decade so far? Moonlight, Spotlight, Birdman, 12 Years, Argo, Artist, or The King's Speech? Honestly, King's Speech. And you know, it's funny, I know a number of people, I know a lot, you know what, I know a bunch of you guys haven't even watched The King's Speech. Because maybe it looks to you like it's kind of slow and dry and boring. And it is a slower movie, for sure. It's a slower movie, but the performances in it are so damn good. And the way they tell the story is so enrapturing. I remember there's this great scene between the king, the new king, if you will. And so it's Colin Firth and Jeffrey Rush. Colin Firth plays the king, and he won the Oscar that year for Best Actor. And Jeffrey Rush, who very easily could have won Best Supporting Actor. There's a scene in that movie that is one of my favorite scenes of the last 10 years. And all it is it an action scene? No. Is somebody trying to assassinate the king? No. You know what it is? It's this scene, and the whole scene is just these two men sitting in chairs across from each other, talking. And I think the scene is like 7 minutes long, and I could have watched 2 hours of it. The way the story and the dialogue and the performances that these guys were giving, it made me love being a movie fan. I highly recommend, if you have not watched The King's Speech, treat yourself, watch The King's Speech. It's amazing. Ben Rayner writes, would you see a Face-Off / remake, or a Face-Off remake starring Vin Diesel and The Rock? I mean, sure, I'd go see it, but would I be excited about it? Probably not. I love Face Off, but nah. Ben Rayner also writes, I want your input on debate. Who's deeper in the friend zone? Finn or Jorah? Oh, Jorah. Jorah is way deeper in the friend zone. Although, I will say this, for both the Finn situation and the Jorah situation, when Finn and Rey see each other again at the end of The Last Jedi, I feel like something a little bit has changed in Rey as far as how she looks at Finn. I'm not saying she's suddenly in love with him. I'm not suggesting that, but I think there was something a little bit different. So maybe there was some shifting sand there. But you can also say the same thing with Khaleesi and Jorah. Because when Jorah reunites with Khaleesi, maybe it's just me, but it's something in the performance made me go, she's happier than she thought she would be to see him back. I don't know. I think, so maybe both of them are banging on the doors to get out of the friend zone, but I'd say that Jorah is probably a little bit more deeply rooted in the friend zone. All right. Siobhan Dixit writes, did you read the comments of Episode 9 versus Infinity War vid that you put up yesterday? I'd pick Infinity War easy. You chose Episode 9, but the comments were largely favoring Infinity War, like by a landslide. Did The Last Jedi really sour fans that much? Oh, I don't think so. I think even before The Last Jedi came out, I think, look, The Last Jedi, because I remember I had similar discussions before The Last Jedi ever hit theater. And, pardon me, those discussions there were still a lot of people saying Infinity War, because to a lot of people, like Star Wars Episode 8 is just the middle chapter of Star Wars. And I remember we talked about this on the show before, and there was a lot of people commenting about this before The Last Jedi ever came out. A lot of people kind of see, hey, yeah, The Last Jedi is great. I can't wait to come see it. Can't wait for it to come out, blah, blah, blah. But it's like the middle chapter of the story. Whereas a lot of people look at Infinity War, even though we have Avengers 4 coming out after that, a lot of people look at Infinity War as the culmination of everything that has happened in the MCU up until this point. So even before The Last Jedi hit theater, there was a lot of people on that basis, and that's understandable, who are saying, yeah, but like 17 movies of the MCU have all been building up to this moment, Infinity War, of Thanos finally getting involved and showing up, and the Infinity Gauntlet coming into play at last, and blah, blah, blah. It has been years and years and years in the making, 17 films in the making to build up to this one point. And Episode 8 is just the middle chapter. So there was that discussion. As far as the Episode 9 thing goes, I still think the fact that Infinity War is right around the corner, it is that 17-film build-up and all that kind of stuff, I completely expect there to be, again, even before The Last Jedi to come out, that even talking about Episode 9, that a lot of people would feel that way. It's understandable. I am not wired that way. I know there's a bunch of other people who are not wired that way. Like I said, I'm looking forward. I don't take anything Star Wars over MCU because, like I said, this year, I am more looking forward to Infinity War than I am Solo. Episode 9 is a different situation, but it's totally understandable that a lot of people, understanding the circumstances and the context of what Infinity War represents, that a lot of people all year have been really looking forward to Infinity War more than anything else, so it's totally understandable. Kalob, I'm going to start going through these a little more quickly, guys. Kalob Lawrence writes, Moana or Greatest Showman soundtrack? Greatest Showman soundtrack. I think Moana's the better movie overall. I like The Greatest Showman very much. The music is so great. And I don't know if there's any one song in The Greatest Showman that I like as much as Moana's main song, There's a lie where the sky meets the sea, it calls me. No one knows how far it goes. Anyway, you're welcome, America. So, I don't know if there's any one song in The Greatest Showman that I like as much as that song, but overall, The Greatest Showman soundtrack, easily. Greatest Showman soundtrack, easily. TNS93 writes, do you have plans to make a Game of Thrones 8 prediction video? Nope. I like Game of Thrones. I'm a fan. I've seen every episode, but I have not read the books. I don't rewatch every episode 18 times, so I'm not really in a position to make a prediction. When the season starts, I'll be doing reviews of the show with Kaori and Ann like we did last year, and I'll give little predictions as we go along, but I'm probably not going to make an overall Game of Thrones prediction video. Andrew Christie writes, with the DCEU under so much uncertainty and chaos, do you think an actor like Jake Gyllenhaal's caliber could actually want to jump into the franchise in its current state? Or maybe it's not so much of a risk because it's Batman. Here's the thing, I've talked about this before, and it goes to a sports analogy. Jake Gyllenhaal is in a really unique situation. If Jake Gyllenhaal goes into a Batman movie, and again, there's nothing he's saying is guaranteed that that's what's going to happen, so let's keep that in mind. But if it happened, and Jake Gyllenhaal jumped in, if it doesn't work, Jake Gyllenhaal's not going to get any of the blame for it because the whole situation's already a mess. There's already a huge mess surrounding the DCEU. So if he goes in there and it doesn't work, okay, he took a shot at it. No one's going to blame him for it. So he's fine. However, Jake Gyllenhaal goes into that thing with the DCEU kind of being in the scenario that it's in right now and delivers, and the movie ends up being a massive hit and people love him as Batman, and he will get called the savior of the DCEU. That's the upside. The upside is that Jake Gyllenhaal could swing in, no pun intended, could swing in and be labeled the savior of the DCEU if everything goes well. That's the upside. But there's no downside. Because he goes in there and it doesn't work and it doesn't do as well as people thought it would, blah, blah, blah. No one's going to blame him. No one's going to put that responsibility on him because he already knew the thing is in that's this kind of a trajectory. So there's no downside, but there's plenty of potential upside. So if I'm Jake Gyllenhaal, and I think, holy crap, I could become a legend with film fans, especially comic book movie fans. I could become a legend of epic proportions if I go into this movie, work with Matt Reeves, and it turns out to be the big hit everybody wants it to be, becomes the first billion-dollar film in the DCEU, and all this kind of stuff. he would be labeled, him and Matt Reeves both, would be labeled as saviors. And there's no downside. So yeah, I could see him doing it, absolutely. I would if I was in his shoes. Christopher Marabella just sends in a super chat. Thank you so much, Christopher. I appreciate the support. Piero writes, do you think JJ is working on Half-Life 3 script? Nope. I think he's completely wrapped up in Star Wars Episode 9 right now. Shavom Dixit writes, I'm still astonished how DCEU has been able to turn me off from watching some of my favorite heroes of all time. I love these DC characters, but I have no interest in these films anymore. It hurts saying that. And I think there's a lot of DC fans that are in that boat. But you know what? Don't give up on it. Don't give up on it. Look, there are some people out there who seem to think being a fan means you stick your head in the sand and never admit anything's wrong. That's not what being a fan is. But being a fan is being able to say, yep, that didn't work, or things didn't work out, or this didn't do as well as we wanted it to, this didn't turn out the way it is, being able to acknowledge that, but still being hopeful for the future. And again, I like that Warner Brothers is a type of company. Are they making some questionable decisions to me? Yes, I think they are making some questionable decisions, but at least they're recognizing there's an issue. And they're trying to do some things and try some things to correct the issue. That doesn't mean it's going to work. But I think we as comic book movie fans should still be hopeful. And next up is Aquaman. And I love Jason Momoa's Aquaman. So let's keep our eyes on that. Let's be realistic about what probably will happen. But at the same time, let's be optimistic about what could happen. So that's just my thoughts on that. Sean Zimmy writes, hello from Concordia College. Oh, hello, Sean. I've been around Concordia a little bit myself. Have you heard the Justice League Blu-ray has only one deleted scene and it only being a Walmart exclusive? Thoughts? I have not heard that, so I cannot comment on that if it's true. There's definitely this really annoying pattern in the past 10 years or so that there's not one standard Blu-ray release. It's like Walmart's will have this special feature, but Target's release will have this special feature. And Amazon, if you buy it off Amazon, will have this special feature. Just give me a Blu-ray with all the features. I'm paying you $30 for a Blu-ray. That's one of the reasons I don't buy Blu-rays anymore. Is all this stupid nonsense about exclusives to Walmart, exclusive to Target, exclusive to Amazon, exclusive to iTunes. Like, that's why I don't buy Blu-rays. Because that whole thing just pisses me off completely. But no, I have not heard about that report. I'll look into that, though, Sean. Let's see. Galen Barbie writes, what do you think of Linda Carter, the original Wonder Woman, as recast for Leia in Star Wars Episode 9? I think she would be a good fit. Your thoughts? Look, I think any really, really good actress would be a good fit. My one hesitation with Linda Carter is I have not really watched her act much in the past 10 years. So I honestly don't have a gauge on, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying I don't know. I don't have a gauge on where her acting chops are right now. So look, if they say she's good and she pops up in it, then fine. But you know me, that's how I think. I don't care what actor they put in a role, as long as it's a good actor. That's all I care about. Let's see. Luke1234 writes, do you think Disney will listen to the fan backlash of The Last Jedi or dismiss it and continue on with their vision regardless of how the fans feel? But here's the thing, Luke. They will dismiss it. You know why? When you say regardless of how the fan feel. What fans? You or me? Because it sounds to me like you're one of the people who doesn't like The Last Jedi, which is totally fine. So should they listen to you and dismiss me? There's a lot of fans out there. Look, I've been telling fans of The Last Jedi to say, look, you have to accept and understand that there's a significant number of people out there who don't like The Last Jedi. And that's okay. But it seems to me as well that there are people out there who don't like The Last Jedi who also seem to be putting buckets over their heads and failing to recognize there's a hell of a lot of people out here who do love The Last Jedi and who do like it. So, Luke, when you say, do you think that Disney will listen to the fans? Well, which fans? The ones that love The Last Jedi? Or the ones that don't love The Last Jedi? Which ones? Normally, when we say things like that, we're speaking from a very self-centered point of view. We all do. I'm not saying you're doing. I'm saying we all do it. We all do this. Disney should listen to the fans. Well, which fans? This big group of fans over here who love The Last Jedi, or this big group of fans over here who didn't? Which fans are you saying they should listen to? Don't say they should listen to the fans, because not all the fans are saying what you want them to say. And I would say that to either side. The fans that love The Last Jedi, the fans that don't. So Disney is going to do what Disney should do. Whatever they think is best. You've heard me say it before. Famous NFL coach once said, when asked by a reporter, do you listen to what the fans say you should do when you're making your game plan? And the NFL coach said, coaches that listen to the fans are destined to be sitting with them next week. And that's true. Disney's going to do what they want to do and what works for them. And because they've been pretty successful, that means sometimes they're going to drop the ball, but more times than not, they knock it out of the park. So no, they're not going to concern themselves with what a segment of the fans are saying or what this segment of the fans are saying. They're going to do what they think is best, because doing what they think is best has worked for them on a massive scale. Look, they've put out 3 Star Wars movies since they took it over. All of them have made over $1 billion. That's never happened before to any Star Wars movies, but all of them made over $1 billion. So they're doing okay. They're doing okay. Do I wish, as a fan of The Last Jedi, that more people liked it? Yep, I wish they did. And I wish it was the type of movie that more people would have attached themselves to. Absolutely. Do they need to do better going into Episode 9? Yes. Yes, because even though I like The Last Jedi, look, even though I like Justice League, I gotta go. There's a lot of people who didn't. And so DC's got to do better. I like The Last Jedi, but that doesn't mean I stick my head in the sand and go, oh, that means everything's perfect. No, 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 no. There's a good group of people out there who didn't like it. That means even though I liked it, it's got to do better. And they got to do better. But they won't be doing better by listening to you or by listening to me or by listening to whatever else, because you don't know what you're talking about, and neither do I. They're the ones who make these movies, so I trust them. Let's see. James Smith writes, I was looking through the Star Trek TV shows and realized, how come there hasn't been a Star Wars live-action TV show unless I just don't know? Because it would be super expensive. They didn't want to dilute the story. George Lucas was looking at for a while at getting one pulled together, but there were just too many obstacles and it never actually got done. I do believe, though, you're going to see one with this new Disney streaming service. I do believe we're going to see one. I think we're going to see one finally, and at last, it will happen. Asmer Junkie writes, Tron Uprising was really good, but they put it on the shitty Disney XD and a terrible time slot. I wish they gave Tron another shot. Star Wars Rebels is on Disney XD, and it's doing just fine. It's doing just fine. But it was in a terrible time slot. Guess what? I didn't watch it live. I watched it on streaming services afterwards. Other people could have done that too. So again, let's not make excuses for it. Oh, it's because they did this and they... No, it's because people didn't care about watching it. Just accept that. There weren't enough people that were interested in watching it, and that's it. Like I said, Star Wars Rebels is on Disney XD, and it's doing great. So I don't buy that. Oh, the reason it didn't do well is because it was on Disney XD. No, that's not the reason. Because even by Disney XD standards, Disney XD said this is not getting enough viewers. And they pulled the plug on it. So there we go. But I'm with you. I like the show. I thought it was pretty good. I was really disappointed when they didn't do a season 2. Let's see. I only got like 5 minutes left, so I'll rush through as many of these as I can. Ghostface1999 writes, Hey, John, film is subjective, but there is criteria used to determine what makes a movie Oscar-worthy. What is that criteria? Do you know? No. There are no scientific measurements. There is nothing you can physically measure in a movie other than runtime. Runtime is it. You can measure runtime. There is no other formula. There's nothing else that you can quantify. There's no measurable criteria. Art is an experiential thing. You stand in front of it and it hits you, and it either hits you in such a way that you thought that was amazing, Like the flavor of a toffee. If it's good, you put it in your mouth and you just have this experience with it, that this was wonderful. Or you put it in your mouth and it just wasn't. There's nothing that measures it. So, and that's why that's the best thing about movies, is there's always going to be disagreements about that, because it's all subjective. Linus 2014 Cougar writes, over under 75% that Gyllenhaal is the new Batman. That's a good number, 75%, because that makes it tough. I'll take under. If you set the line at 60, I might take over, but 75 is a great line. I'll take the under on 75. I do believe he's going to be it, and I believe it's over a 50-50 chance, but 75 is a pretty big number, so I'll take the under on that. Shavome writes, never stop doing what you're doing. You're my role model. I'm a dangerous role model, man. Be careful about that. But thank you so much. I appreciate that. Brendan Mills writes, how excited are you for Captain Marvel? Also, what would it take for me to get a kiss from the camp man himself? Just kidding. Love you, John. Never stop rocking it. I'm pretty easy, so it's not difficult to get a kiss from me. Honestly, I'm not feeling a whole bunch of excitement for Captain Marvel. Not because I'm not looking forward to it, but because I've got too much right in front of me right now. I got Black Panther. Oh my God, Black Panther is about to come out. I got Avengers Infinity War. We got Deadpool 2. We got Ant-Man and the Wasp. We got, we got so much big stuff. That's kind of soaking up all of my big enthusiasm right now. I guarantee you, as we get closer to Captain Marvel, my enthusiasm will get a lot bigger, but right now there's just too many other things there. Mark Hansen writes, what does Mark Hansen write? Mark Hansen writes, love the show, John. Thank you so much. Have you heard anything about this rumor going around that Tom Holland is in the Venom movie? Stay filthy, brother. Well, I mentioned this on the show yesterday. That rumor was started by somebody that I know, and because it's from somebody that I know, I'm not going to comment on it. So I mentioned that on the show yesterday. It's not my place to comment on it because, like I said, it's from somebody that I worked with and that I know. So I'm going to not comment on that story. I mentioned that yesterday, so I'm just going to stay consistent with that today. Koba writes, over under 25% that Boba Fett is in Solo, and would Tamura Morrison play him? Well, no, he wouldn't play him. And no, I don't. I'll take the under. I'll take the under on 25%. I Do Monologues writes, who would you cast as Donald Trump in a biopic? Again, as long as it's somebody who's a good actor. I mean, right now, just because he's done such a great job with it, probably Alec Baldwin, but as long as it's a good actor, that's all I would care about. Entertainment Buddy writes, when will we get news of the upcoming DC streaming service? And what movies/shows do you think we will get? When do you think it'll be released? No idea. I really haven't been keeping my ear to the ground on that. All I know is that it is coming. We already know of a couple of shows that they're doing, like we got Titans and things like that. But overall, what kind of stuff are they going to put on there? I really don't know anything about what strategy that they're employing and bringing to the table on this. So we're really just going to have to all wait and see. And maybe there is a release date that's been announced, but if there is, I haven't heard of it. But then again, I admit I haven't been keeping my ear to the ground. I haven't been paying really close attention to what's going on with the Warner Brothers streaming service. I haven't been paying attention to that. So we're going to see a lot of original stuff. I think we're going to see some animated stuff. I think they're going to do a lot of DC stuff. I don't think it'll be in canon with what's going on in the DCEU. But lots of stuff there to do. As soon as I know anything more about it, though, Entertainment Buddy, I'll definitely talk about it on here. Let's see. Kedar Padgur sends in a super chat. Thank you so much. KW Garrett writes, am I the only person underwhelmed by The Post? I think Villeneuve, Greta Gerwig, and Jordan Peele were more impressive directors this year regarding the Oscars. Well, I'm sure you're not the only person who thinks that. I thought The Post was bloody freaking brilliant. I thought it was 10 times better than Lady Bird. Honestly, all film's subjective. Everybody freaking loves Lady Bird. I had a hard time getting through that movie. I'll be honest with you. I did. I had a really, really difficult time getting through that movie. I thought it was boring as fuck. I really did. Then again, I'm not a teenage girl. I'm not a mother dealing with a teenage girl. Maybe if I was more in that context, I would look at it from a different set of eyes and a different perspective. I totally get it. All I know is that for me as an audience member sitting there, it did not work. But to me, The Post was... Oh, I thought the post was freaking brilliant. Freaking brilliant. I wouldn't award it Best Picture this year. I would definitely nominate it, but I wouldn't award it Best Picture. But I love the post. Sujith writes, does on the par box office numbers of The Last Jedi prove that Star Wars is not invincible as an IP, as opposed to the wrong notion of that it is underperformed? Well, no IP is invincible. None. It is definitely the mightiest thing out there. And, like, keep in mind, too, The Last Jedi is the second biggest Star Wars box office of all time. The only Star Wars movie that's ever done better at the box office than Star Wars The Last Jedi was Star Wars The Force Awakens. And I've been telling everybody for years, it is not going to equal Star Wars The Force Awakens. It's not going to hit that number. I thought it would be more than 1.4. I thought it would be in the 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 range. So it's lower than what I expected. But make no mistake about it. It is not invincible. No IP is invincible. Star Wars is definitely not invincible. There's just too many other things grabbing for the movie-going audience's attention these days. My Opinions writes, thoughts on John Flickinger. I don't know who that is, so I can't really give my opinion. Thunder Knight 19 writes, how successful do you think Bumblebee will be, considering The Last Knight made half of what I can't remember what AOE stands for. I don't know. I mean, we got to see the trailer. We got to see the trailer. And it's a Bumblebee movie as opposed to a full-blown Transformers movie. Working for it, they've got a new director, but most average filmgoers don't know who's directing a movie. So, gosh, man. I'll say worldwide, I think the final total on Bumblebee, but again, I'm going to change my numbers completely once I see a trailer. I'm going to guess around $450 million. I'll go $450 million. Brendan Torres writes, myself and most people never read the Force Awakens novel, so when Rey and Poe met on the Falcon, I thought, well, finally. Thought it was a cool 3-second scene. To me, even if you didn't read the novel, it felt awkward and dumb. Especially considering that Rey was on that planet for at least a day, where Poe was, and the fact of the matter is it was in the novelization. And even though the novelization is canon or it's not, you don't get to say, novels are canon, except when this... No. It's either canon or it's not canon. Because now you're back to the old system of G canon, A canon, B canon, all these different levels of canon. If you say something is canon, then it's canon. You're not sort of pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. There's no middle ground there. You're pregnant or you're not pregnant. It's canon or it's not canon. So anyway, that thing always bothered me. But anyway, thanks for the comment, Jake. Harris Music writes, if Warner Brothers puts you in charge of making a live-action Akira, how would you approach it and make the movie a box office success? Oh, come on, Harris. I mean, that's an hour-long discussion about what you would do with it. I would make it a North American version of the story. And I know there's some people yelling at your screens, oh, you're going to whitewash it. Hey, look, I'm sorry. If you wanted to succeed at the box office, you have a better chance of doing that if you say this story takes place in New San Francisco or something like that. But if you're asking me, what would I do to make it a box office success? Translate the story to a North American thing, because guess what? 9 out of 10 average movie-going audiences out there have no idea what Akira is. So put the story in a context they are more likely to come out and watch, so that's what I would do. I mean, if you do set it in Japan, make sure you cast all Japanese actors. I mean, absolutely. But if you say this story takes place in San Francisco or in New York or whatever, then you can play around with it a little bit. Courtney Haynes writes, and I lost, where did Courtney go? Courtney Haynes writes, what % of movies that make it to theaters can be considered successful? And what is it about video games that it seems they don't produce good movies? Well, okay, again, Courtney, those are two very, very different questions. And the second part of your question is one for a huge, long discussion. So I'm going to skip over the thing about the video game movies. Probably about 30%, maybe 40% of movies we can probably consider successful, which means it's not all of them. And again, we're talking successful, not necessarily good. Good is probably a smaller number. But as far as successful as in they made enough money to make the producers happy and blah, blah, blah. These are major release films, okay? Major release films, films that get that far. Out of all films, like so you're saying, that actually make it to theaters, I'd say maybe around somewhere between 30 and 40% would be my guess. Victor Von Doom writes, love your show, thanks, and keep up the great work. Thank you so much, Victor. And the final question today comes to us from Salvador Rodriguez, who writes, love your show. What is your favorite Mexican or Spanish language film? Man, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. that is something I'd have to sit down and think about, because it's not like I've watched 100 Spanish language films in my life. As far as which one I would actually pick, I'm not really sure. Now, guys, I noticed there are a bunch of questions that came in after that, but as I mentioned, I wasn't going to take any more questions after Salvador's question. I will take Adam's question, because I noticed that Adam's questions just slipped in there just as I was saying it. But Adam K's question writes, why did Paddington 2 underperform in the U.S.? Well, what do you mean underperform? No one ever thought Paddington was going to be a $200 million movie. It's an odd release time in North America. January, especially like the second, third week of January, is a very awkward time. Paddington was not a big mega blockbuster. It's doing fine internationally, but I don't think it's fair to say that the movie underperformed. I don't think it's fair to say that it underperformed. Anyway, guys, that will do it for me for this installment of the John Campea Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. Listen, don't forget, guys, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click that subscription button. Make sure you click the thumbs up button. Jump into the comments section below and leave your thoughts on any or all the topics we discussed here today. And again, make sure you check out my Patreon page as well. And one last reminder, starting on Monday, not tomorrow, but Monday, the John Campea Show will be going live at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 11 a.m. East Coast Time. That will do it for me for today, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. My name is John Campea, and until the next video, bye-bye.